JV Gwaltney, No Man's Sky next.
Yeah, so I've been checking out No Man's Sky for us. We're checking it out for like a week. I'm just playing it for a week and updating, my impressions and what I find in my interstellar journeys. The first day was kind of lackluster, I guess, because I tried to start a new game just going blind again after not playing for like 2 years or however long it's been since the game came out.
Yeah.
And so the game opens up and you wake up marooned on a planet and you have to repair your ship. So I start doing that. And then I hit a point where it's like, okay, now go find this thing to fix your ship. It's off planet. And there was no way for me to get off planet. And of course, Kyle came along, and he killed me before I could ask for a ride.
There are any number of things I could have done to help you, but I chose to kill you.
To kill me, yeah. So after that, I just loaded into to one of my old saves where I'd gotten off the planet, had about 15 hours in, and the majority of the time it still felt like the No Man's Sky I played 2 years ago. It looked a little bit better. It didn't really run that much better, and I'm playing on PS4 Pro. There are still like big stutters, especially when you're shooting through space with the Pulse engine.
Right. Even on PC, I think it looks pretty good overall, but I mean, definitely flying through asteroids. There's still a lot of that pop in and a little bit of hiccup here and there, but overall for the scope of that game. But I feel like we're kind of bearing the lead here because No Man's Sky next. So this is the update. It's out on Xbox One now as well. But just to get like the big things out of the way, added a third-person perspective. You can now build anywhere, which is pretty wild. And then because they had to reseed the universe in theory with this update, changed a lot of the planets just because when they're updating the code, it has these ripple effects. So they did this weird thing where they archived everybody's base, right? Just because the planet might be completely different, but you can still plant your old bases anywhere. So you can still import your old save and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Other big things they added rings for the planets. The clouds have been completely overhauled, which for No Man's Sky nerds is huge. And that's the thing, JV. I see there are those hot takes out there. Yes.
Are you skipping multiplayer?
That's the biggie, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is true multiplayer, and that's why you were able to destroy JV's day yesterday.
I ruined his day, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. You just wrecked me.
With friendly fire, which is the crazy part.
JV got me back, and you can see that in the new gameplay today video. You super killed me.
Yeah, I did get you good. I did get you pretty good. But yeah, it's I decided this morning, after sort of the lackluster impressions yesterday, where it's just I just feel like I'm playing the same game because the problem with the original game is still here, and there's really no way to fix it except for launching into sandbox mode, which I've been playing today. Is that I still feel like so much of that game is dedicated to filling meters, like scavenging for resources to refill your fuel, to build complexes and stuff, and all that's fine in theory, but it's just so much tediousness in No Man's Sky without how everything plays out, how long it takes to scavenge resources. But this morning I loaded up sandbox mode, which gives you unlimited resources, which gives you everything basically. And sure, it removes some of the challenge, but I've been having so much fun for the past 2 hours, just building bases, just going from place to place, upgrading my weapons. I really feel this is the game I always wanted from No Man's Sky. It's just sort of that thrill of exploration without being pulled back by poorly designed scavenging resource management mechanics.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not a place for those mechanics, but I don't think No Man's Sky has ever done a great job of balancing challenge and tediousness. When does this become boring? And the answer with No Man's Sky's resource stuff is almost always, it's always boring.
Yeah. JV, I'm totally with you where it's that weird thing where going back into it, it's I see people saying oh, this is essentially No Man's Sky 2 at this point. I think that's really overblowing what No Man's Sky Next is. And going into it again, even last night, starting a new game, several new games, because I kept starting on these poisonous, hazardous planets from hell with the radiation, which was just a nightmare. But starting so many times over and over again, it's man, it's just the systems of survival and the UI in particular still don't feel natural to me. And maybe I can blast through that hurdle. Certainly plenty of people out there have.
Yeah.
But I just feel the core of this game is so good. Landing on a planet from outer space still feels so wildly unique. There's so many amazing things about this game. I want like a Blizzard to do a pass over the systems on top, you know, when the guts are so good.
I remember even fighting for it the year it came out. As I was one of those who was like, I don't think we should put this on our top 50. But one of the things I did want No Man's Sky to be on was our top 10 moments of the year of just leaving a planet for the first time. Like that moment is still great. But I'm with you guys. Like the baseline game is still kind of dull and frustrating.
Yeah,
anything else, you know.
It is definitely one of those games that you play, and it's a game where it shines most in the little moments, like breaking atmosphere and flying into the station and stuff. But it's just so tedious. Everything else.
I do like there are just like missions now, which I really like, and they're not like overly complicated missions. Like I did 2. One was like feed 5 animals, which is like another new thing where you can feed animals and they'll like you and they'll follow you around, which is nice. And then another one was like go to this planet and find this missing person and convince them to come home. And I got like, you know, stuff for that. And just having that little carrot of like things to do was exciting to me. And that is the thing that is most likely to get me to dive back in and return to it after kind of abandoning it after playing it for about 10 hours.
Yeah, I think the thing about that though, Kyle, is like I get where you're coming from, but it's also fairly damning of like the original game, the original version. You know, because I feel like a lot of the defense that the original No Man's Sky game got was, people had unrealistic expectation of what this game was going to be, that you could play it forever and this or that. And people aren't wrong. Like there was that expectation, but at the same time, like I feel like even if you had like modest expectations or like average expectations of like, this is going to be a game that gives me stuff to do and quests to do and, you know, has a interesting overarching storyline set in a world to explore, a big world, it failed on that account.
I mean, pretty early on, they made it clear that that's not what this game was. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons that I went into it with such low expectations, and it met those low expectations. But now, like, even having just a little bit of mission variety is more exciting to me than just making sure my ship is fueled.
Yeah,
like, which is basically what it was before.
Yeah, and in their messaging, JV, where they've said 1,000 times, Hello Games has it, like, hey, it's more 2001 than it is Star Wars. Like, I'm down for the 2001 game, but I've never cracked through that barrier of having that experience with No Man's Sky, where it's still, every time, it's like, I want to just trip out and relax and journey across the galaxy and see some weird stuff along the way, but realistically, it's, hey, these meters are going down. You have to refuel. You need plutonium. Like, where is plutonium? Where's uranium? What
Google
is
No Man's Sky plutonium to see what it looks like.
And I like survival games. Like, I'm down for that. I just feel like something in the UI or the way the systems are presented is just not really clear.
Yeah.
Ben, I would definitely switch over. I'd give it one more shot and play it in sandbox mode, because it definitely, those tweaks fix that constant resource thing. The constant like dullness that comes from like having to replenish meters, like Sandbox totally fixes that.
Okay, and then just go around the galaxy, have a good time.
Yeah, I mean that's what I've been doing for like the past hour and a half, 2 hours.
Perfect, become a space baby.
Yeah, exactly. Find the space baby at the edge of the galaxy.
Another thing we haven't really touched on yet is I do like how third person has been implemented. Yeah. I like being able to see the character. I think that makes a difference. And the animations are good. You know,
they're
like
good
they're solid.
For sure. Yeah,
they're better than like a Skyrim or a Fallout, I would say, as far as like third person goes. Not like by a huge margin, but
there's emotes, which everybody agrees is what Skyrim was mainly lacking with its third person perspective. A bunch of wacky emotes in there, but like you can play with 4 other people. It seems like.
Yeah.
And so how does it work? If you guys are on opposite ends of the galaxy, can you just warp to each other?
I feel like you have it's fairly conventional. I joined Kyle's game, his lobby, and it put me in his system. So it's not like, you have to warp to your friend. You can just fly to them.
And Jamie, that was when you started a new game, right?
Right.
So like your crashed ship that you needed to repair just was on the planet that I was currently on.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And eventually you guys can run a freighter together, which I know Sean Murray in interviews, he said like, it's about 1 hour to get to the building mechanics if you start from scratch. Then about 6 hours, you should be able to be piloting a freighter and doing missions, launching stuff from there, which seems super fun with a group of friends if you can get through that No Man's Sky hurdle.
It's a big hurdle.
It is, but it's interesting, like, in the messaging with the launch, you know, Hello Games, notoriously, they were like Willy Wonka locking themselves back in the chocolate factory for years. And then Sean Murray came out last week and did the Willy Wonka roll on the carpet. Ta-da!
Except his was like a big shoulder shrug.
Oh, sorry. But he just did like a handful of interviews, right?
Yeah.
And in that, just talking about like they had a very clear defense of, obviously it was a loud part of the internet that was so outraged, but they're like, hey, the stats back us up. Like there are so many stories about refunds for No Man's Sky, and they're like, statistically, it was like barely higher than average. And in terms of like average play session, seems like most people were satisfied. A lot of people sunk a lot of time into this game, and there is definitely that No Man's Sky community that's passionate as hell about this thing.
That's awesome. I'm glad it found its audience. Like I'm happy for that game, because even though it's not really for me, like there's something interesting and cool about it, like building a universe within a game.
Yes, it is a fascinating project. Just diving back in and realizing, oh yeah, this is the biggest game ever made by a mile. Even if you're wandering around just miles of empty wasteland with a freaky looking Metroid alien blopping around or whatever the hell's going on there, you know?
The game's more interesting to me on a meta level in that way, and that like I'm interested to see what No Man's Sky is, if it's anything, 5 years from now. Because it feels like it's sort of, probably the most popular early access game in a way, except maybe PUBG, where it's just like, this is a game that's defined by its developments and how it's going to develop and what wasn't there in the beginning and what will be there, at the end, question mark, if there is an end, if it just keeps on going and going and going and becomes kind of like a weird MMO.
Even though they insisted back in the day that, we don't like early access. We don't even want to go that route. But it is that fascinating hypothetical of if they did call it early access, how would the reaction have changed? I have no idea. But
I think, at a certain point it is all labels with early access and stuff. But I think by most people's definition, seeing what wasn't in the beginning of No Man's Sky, like to me, No Man's Sky at the beginning was a prototype. It was a very fancy and impressive prototype, but there wasn't like content built on top of that prototype, at least not to the level that people wanted or were expecting. So I feel like it's definitely been, for me, it's an early access game. Even if they want to play, do the marketing thing and be like, oh, it's not early access because early access is marketing poison, blah, blah, blah.
And we need Sony to back us, and they don't allow early access on their platform. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's early access.
Yeah, could be. In terms of like improving into the future, they're rolling out like community missions on a weekly basis. It's really evolving in theory into a living game. And they say that even though this might be the biggest update yet, this isn't the end of it. They're going to keep updating it on into the future. So I'm really curious how they keep supporting this thing.
And how long it goes on. Like, I'm curious, like, what the incentive is there besides, like, obviously fostering the community. If there's, like, a financial incentive from Sony or someone just to, like, keep making this game, last.
I don't think.
Or if it's just Hello Games.
I think it's just Hello Games at this point. But in theory, there's enough players, and I think No Man's Sky Next has enough good buzz. I'm sure more people will jump on and give this crazy ambitious project a whirl with this one.
Yeah.
Did anything strike you, JV? Did you read any of those interviews that they've been giving out?
Just the one when Sean announced that it was coming to Xbox, which was a while ago, but I haven't been keeping up with that sort of conversation for a while now.
Okay. It's
one of those things I'd see a headline and be like, oh, they're talking about, No Man's Sky again. I kind of left that game behind, but I might now, just because it feels like I'm vastly more interested in this game now and how it evolves.
Yeah.
After having a taste of like, oh, there's actually content now.
Right. I'm still fascinated by that story, and like some of the interviews they've given. I think it was Eurogamer in particular really drilled them in on what my biggest issue with them still is just the messaging of the multiplayer out of the gate. And they were like, we were pushing for it to the last possible second, but we had to ship it. We had obligations to bigger corporations, clearly Sony and stuff, to like get this out the door at this particular point, and they weren't able to make multiplayer in the way that people were expecting, which is what's in No Man's Sky Next with that initial launch. But still, the idea that they weren't able to message that, and remember there's that weird thing where Sony with the packaging had to change like online options at the last second as well. Yeah. I understand they're focused on game development, they're game developers, but it's like, just communicate it. Just one tweet could have taken care of that, Did
you see the Good Old Games thing yesterday?
That's an odd one. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so I actually had to write this up this morning where Good Old Games and Hello Games launched the GOG version of No Man's Sky, which GOG is like Steam's biggest competitor, in quotes. Like technically they exist as a competitor, but
Yeah.
And it turns out, and GOG and Hello Games did make this clear, and No Man's Sky has been on GOG for, ever since it came to PC. is that the multiplayer part of the next update wouldn't be in the GOG version of the game until later on in 2018. So, you've probably had a fair number of players who have bought No Man's Sky on GOG.com with the expectation of being able to play multiplayer, who didn't find out until the day that the update went live that like, oh, that's not the case. I have to wait until some unknown time later this year to play the multiplayer version of the game. And it's just another chapter and sort of the piss poor messaging from Hello Games about this game, about what this game is. And it feels kind of slimy to a degree, I think.
God, and to think that they must be in extra careful mode after everything that's happened to them, and they've been through some tough, dark times over there with death threats, everything you can imagine, as Sean put it. But like, they had this blog post, just make a little star at the bottom that says, by the way, we feel really bad about it. The GOG version isn't going to be quite up to par with Steam out of the gate. Like, that's all you had to do. I don't know why you wouldn't just include that one sentence in there.
Right.
It's very confusing.
And to be fair, it's probably more than just Hello Games in this arena. It's GOG too. I mean, I'm sure there was like a decent effort to make this version playable, the multiplayer in it. I'm not sure what technological hurdles they'd have to overcome. That's completely out of my purview, but
right.
There's game development is definitely tough, but like being open with your potential customers is not. So yeah, I feel like out of the gate when they announced that, they should have let people know before those people, probably went and bought the game on the basis of finally having multiplayer.
Right, like Suriel bought it on GOG just to play that.
He's got a GOG copy.
It's very strange. The other interesting tidbit, I think it was in the Waypoint interview, Sean Murray was talking about just the collaboration with Sony and just that whole thing in retrospect and how bizarre it was. And he had an interesting analogy where he's like, look, like, I don't know what we expected. He said, we got into the zoo with a 600-pound gorilla, and like what the 600-pound gorilla, which is Sony in this case, does is like try to generate hype for their exclusive deals and the games on their platform. And his explanation was, this game was just a weird little thing, but then it was put on that rocket ship of Sony marketing, and that's what led to so much confusion. Mm-hmm. Which is an interesting analogy. I'll go along with it. And then, but I mean, we did the comes that, and it just comes down to,
they went on the Game Awards and revealed the game and detailed what it was before Sony was involved.
Absolutely. So there's plenty of opportunities for press before that. So it's not the full explanation, but I think then his explanation for everything else is like, well, we're excited. Like we were planning on these features being in. We wanted to talk about it, and it sucks to hear when you're in the press. But he's like, the takeaway from this is that like PR exists for a reason. Having BS talking points exists for a reason. Don't just talk about why you're excited about your game like you're talking with fellow developers at a bar, which is, as he explains it, what they were doing.
Yeah.
Which is just so much confusion.
Outside of Sony, like Sean was his own hype man. I feel like if you go back and you look at our cover story stuff, if you like read the interviews that he gave before the game came out, like obviously I haven't kept up with the game, the interviews post No Man's Sky, but he definitely did enough talking up on his own. For better or for worse.
Well, the talking up thing, there's always the, hey, one man's lie, all that stuff. I still insist, like,
that
he's not lying. Yeah. They were planning on doing this. Just some stuff didn't quite reach that finish line, and they did a very job at communicating what isn't.
No. I don't mean to imply that they were lying. Like, I totally think, I don't agree with the no man's lie sort of meme thing. But also at the same time, it's like, have some expectations in there. Like it feels like in interviews, at least, like I understand like marketing campaigns and stuff, like it's usually good to sort of like temper expectations, I feel like. And I think developers are good at that, usually in interviews from what I've seen. Right.
It's a fascinating saga, continues on. JV, you're going to keep playing it all week then?
Yeah. We're gonna update it daily. We've got a log on GameInformer.com right now, and if you keep coming back, you'll have new stuff towards the end of the day every day.
Cool. There we go. GameInformer.com. That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.